Hi, I'm Bucky Stokes, also known as Dr. Ernest W. Stokes Jr., and also known as Mr. Bucky. Now, Richard, I'm going to talk to you about this because you actually asked the question. When was I called Mr. Bucky? And I don't know exactly when that happened. But in the South, there's a courtesy that we call men, boys, even young boys. We put a Mr. in front of it. So it would be Mr. Bucky even from an early age. And my wife is Miss Phyllis. She's Phyllis. She grew up in the South too and was known by her friends as Miss Phyllis. That's the way that people address us in the South. It probably goes back to plantation days or even before that. And probably in your larger cities, it's not that way. Maybe not in Atlanta, maybe not in Charlotte, I don't know. But in the rural areas, in the small towns in the South, that's the way we address each other. And so that's how it came about, Richard. But going back as far as my name, Bucky, it came about starting when I was a real young boy, probably a year or two old. My daddy was a highway patrolman at that time. And back then, I think, most all highway patrolmen drove motorcycles in South Carolina. And Daddy drove a motorcycle. And one day I was out in the front yard, as my mother tells me about this, because the truth is, I've forgotten. I never knew. I was too young. But I got burned. My daddy was trying to put me on the motorcycle along with him, and the motorcycle was running. And somehow I got burned a little bit. And of course I started to cry and that kind of thing. And there was another man there and looking on, and he said, look at Buddy, he's hurt. Well, that's how it got to be. Well, it never was picked up Buddy, but another man, and I'm not sure it happened on the same day, but another man called me Buck, a little boy named Buck. So this got picked up as a family nickname. That's how it was, because when I was in Columbia growing up as a boy, they called me by my name Ernie. And my son now is named Ernie. But I dropped that over the years, and professionally even, because my friends got to know me as Bucky. I'm known as Bucky Stokes professionally. So that's how all that came about. It's just been through a progression of time that I've been called Bucky. Now, when I picked up my doctorate, when I earned my doctorate, the name Dr. Ernest Stokes came to be, well, the teachers all would call me Dr. Ernest Stokes. And so that's how that happened. But as far as the Mr. Bucky, I'm not sure when that happened. It started at some point, but like I say, it could have started way back in time because of the way we address each other in the South, in small towns in South Carolina. So that's, as far as the name is concerned, we're always called something. I remember that when I was very young and starting to school, my mom and dad didn't want me to be mixed up with my daddy's name. Little Ernie, Big Ernie turned out to be. But so they even said, okay, well, why don't you go by your middle name, Weston? And now I have a grandson, by the way, named Weston. Well, I started calling myself Weston, or, they started calling me Weston, but by, I don't know how long it was, they started calling me Western Union and Western Auto Store. And so I came home one day from school, maybe the first or second grade, and I asked Mom, I said, Mom, can I be called Ernie or even Bucky? But I don't need to be called Weston. Now, I haven't talked to my grandson in a while about this. I hope that he's not running into that now. But I certainly did. And I didn't want to be called by Western Union or Western Auto Store. So I told Mom and Dad, I said, please call me Ernie or Bucky. And so from that point on, I was known as Ernie or Bucky. And I'm sure some people called me Mr. Ernie at some point in time. But I certainly remember being called Little Ernie. And my daddy was Big Ernie, of course. And now I've got a son named Ernie as well. But that lasted a few years as far as the Western Auto Store. But then the Ernie came in, and as I grew up, by the way, in Columbia. And that was another area, maybe that was a little large town. I don't ever remember being called Mr. Bucky in Columbia, or Mr. Ernie for that matter. I was always, known as either Ernie or Bucky. But then when we started moving around, my family, my mom and dad, they moved around various places in rural South Carolina, then I picked up that name Mr. Bucky. That's how people would address me in small towns in South Carolina, in rural South probably. And like I said, I think it goes back to the plantation days. But today, people still call me Mr. Bucky, or they might call me Mr. Ernest, or even Dr. Ernest. I had a friend of mine call me the other day, called me Dr. Ernest. And Miss Phyllis, it was a pastor at a church where we were visiting. So that happens too. So you picked up right many names over the years, but that's how Mr. Bucky came about. And we've used that, Mr. Bucky, even on my website. I've got a category there where it's a question and answer. Ask Mr. Bucky. It's a fond name. It's a name that I enjoy hearing people call me Mr. Bucky, and also addressing Phyllis as Miss Phyllis. I think that shows a lot of respect, and I wish it happened more often in larger towns and cities, but I don't think it does. I really don't, because as I was thinking about this, I don't think I was ever called Mr. Ernie or Mr. Bucky in grade school in Columbia, and that's where I grew up. But as a young boy, we moved around. But from the time that I was in the 5th grade, I grew up in Columbia, and that they never called me Mr. Bucky or Mr. Ernie. So it's an affectionate term. It's a courtesy that we use in South Carolina and in the South, and we use it all the time. We use it all the time. It's just a way of life for us. So Richard, I hope this answers your question. And Richard also asked me if we did devotion. He enjoys the website, and if we do devotions every morning. And yes, we do. Phyllis and I have a devotion every morning, Richard, but I don't always put it on tape, on a CD, so or a DVD, and that's what. Now Phyllis has been after me to do that all the time, and to do a lot more of videos, and I need to do that, but we haven't been doing the devotions on video for some time. I think we've got several of them on video, and I intend to do a lot more of that, but haven't done it yet. But I hope that answers your question, Richard, and I appreciate you visiting me on the website. The website is mountuptozion.com, and I appreciate all the visitors and all the prayer partners on that website. Well, thank you so much for asking, Richard, and I hope this answers the question, because this question's come up before. Thank you so much.
All right, and so the reason you agreed to do this video, would it be because I'm going to make you a banana pudding?
Oh yes, I can't wait to taste that banana pudding now.
All right, so so you just want to go ahead and tell them that you're doing the video because?
I always do. I don't like to do videos particularly. Now, and I guess you know that.
But you're going to start liking them.
But I'm going to start liking them, okay. I'm going to start liking them. But the truth is that yes, if Phyllis wants me to do a video, then I always seem to come up with something that I can that I can get in return for the video. So it's kind of like a job. You know, I've got a job to do or a task or chore, and so I'll say, okay, well now I'll do the video about Mr. Bucky if you will promise me you'll give me that, or you'll bake a cake or particularly the banana pudding. Now that's just top, that tops it all.
Okay. All right.
Thank y'all.